Okay, so this is a short instruction video to show how I make the copper riveted material for my pens, for the steampunk pens. It's not a difficult process. It's just knowing how to translate what you see on large scale. You don't need any high-end tools or anything like that. I use scissors to cut the material to size, preferably larger scissors to get straighter lines. I use two gift cards to do the to create the lines, the panels on the material, and then I just use a cheap bit holder and some small Torx bits or anything like that. You could use a toothpick if it's not too sharp, just about anything if it has a point. And I'll show you how I use it later on. So in basis, you need to figure out what interval suits your the circumference of your tubes best, so that you don't get any strange overlapping or stuff like that. I use this same method for my backings. I tend to use alumunium backings, and this is just like a salad tray. It's like €2 or something at the supermarket. You know, it's the big aluminum platters that you can put salads and stuff, and I just cut them up, and it's I think about 100 micron thick, so 1/10 of a millimeter. And the copper I have at the moment is 70 microns, so that's 0.07 millimeters thick, and it's thin enough to leave some space to build up around your tube, so you have more space for your corks or whatever you want to put on there, or you can do different layers on top of each other for detailing. Just gonna cut a small piece off at the moment, just for shows. Doesn't need to be perfect for now. Always make sure you start with a piece that's larger than what you need, because you always cut stuff down to suit the pen tube best. Make sure your edges are as square as possible by sides, or you can do it, you know, precisely. I've been thinking about using like these half moon paper cutter machines to see how they perform in cutting up thin material like this. I have one in a different room. I'll try that soon. And you make sure it's sort of flat. Now you want to create a 3D effect, so what you're gonna do is normally your paneling has the panels like raised above the seams, and you can make this effect stronger by giving it a final application of rub and buff or whatever. We don't have that stuff over here. And yeah, as far as I've used this stuff on my pens, I haven't needed it at all. This gives enough profiling that you don't need any extra shading or stuff like that. So what I usually do, I make squares. So I just line up one edge, or just go just over it, So you have a straight line to start from. Line it up and just first go lightly over the material and just repeat the motion with slightly increasing pressure. Now, due to this, your material will bend upwards because you're actually flattening the line, so that material needs to go somewhere. If you do this too much, the material will go hard or might even become brittle. Copper is one of the materials that hardens due to when you move it or fold it or tap it or whatever. So you need to account for that as well. So it might stiffen up on the seams. And I just used the roster on this cutting mat. Has 1 centimeter interval. Usually I make squares. Sometimes I will do half size on the height of the tube. So this would be across from left to right. I will show you in a moment. Sorry about the sniffing, but I have a bit of a cold. That should be good for now. It's just for shows. Then when you reach final height, you cut down as close as possible to the edge. You might want to do it on the other side as well. But as I said, leave some room to move the backing around or the accent strips or whatever. Now the whole principle of this will be the same for backing material or background material or accent material. So you see you have a little space over now, so I'm just gonna move it over here, line it up there, and then do the same as I did before. You have a little overhang. Get the second card out. Now, it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you're consequent about it. In a bit I will get the camera in a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing in detail. I think I just might do that now after this one. I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back in a bit closer. Just going to continue where we left off. Now for some smaller tubes, I haven't tried slimline yet. I don't know if it's worth it. But for some smaller tubes you can half the size or half the width of the panels you created. So that's also one reason to leave some overhang for about 50% of one of the panels you make. Just move it over, make it square again. Start your first line, and then you get half-size panels in the width, so that might suit your dimensions in relation to real size paneling, or just for the visual effect, you know, do something different. So I'm gonna do 50% sort of in half size and 50% or whatever. Yeah, this is gonna go off. Now you've just created the panels. Now for the riveting, you just have to remember that you're building in depth, and the rivets are always on top of the panels. So what you do now is just flip it over, and then whatever floats your boat, take your tool and just put it near a corner, not in a corner. Put some pressure down, make sure your impression is evened out, and then figure out where your how high you want to go, or how deep from the other side. But remember the pressure you use for that, and then continue along all the points that you want to do. Now for some panels you want to do it in a corner. I like to do all the same corners first and then move over to a different corner, and that way I don't need to measure out anything. I can just estimate it using the shadows from the seams I just made, or guesstimate. Turn it around a little bit, move over to the next corner. Remember, you're working backwards right now. See, I did this wrong, but now this is a bit tedious or therapeutic. Keeps your hands busy while your thoughts can flow. Get the creative processes going. Figure out your next steps along the way. Now you see, you're already getting this nice paneled effect. I hope it's visible. Yes, it is. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more, show you. Now the technique is very simple, but the visual effect can be very, very stunning. Now I like to do, because you fold the material around the tube, and with the thickness this has and the cutting technique I use, I can get the seams to butt together completely straight. It might be better if I use the paper cutting machine, which I still have to try. But because there's always kind of a wide seam, I like to do, like if I've got a aluminum backing, I can get a pen to show you quickly. Now here is a pen I made a while back, and this has an aluminum background, and this used to be the seam I was talking about. I hope it's visible with the light I have, but I just put a small and narrow copper strip on top of that, over the seam, you know, so you actually accentuate the defect in your work. It's not a defect, but anyway, you make it a real seam, and the way you do that is you have a narrow strip, like half of what you use for the panels, or as narrow as you would like. Straighten that out. and then you just make the accents or the existing seams a bit stronger, and in this case I went half size in height as well, so you get shorter, more squared panels. So now you just move it over to about half. There you go. Make sure to account for the thickness of the tool you are using to make the seams, because you might vary the width unwillingly, and you will find out too late, especially if you don't have a lot of material to use, to work with. And after this, just to make the seam, I use the larger bit. That's enough for now. So you have these seams, and then you flip it over. I took a larger Torx bit. You can even use the I think it's called a, it's not a Phillips, it's with the 4-star points. But I use a larger hex bit, and you put that in, and again seek out the amount of pressure you want to use to get the depth of the rivet you're making. And then you get larger rivets, like on this one. I hope that's sort of visible, barely. Let me just focus up on that. So you get some larger rivets. And then, because after all you're making a steampunk style, in my case, pen, you don't want the fresh and crisp looking copper, nor your cogs or anything like that. You want to age it, you know, you want it to look used. So what I do usually is just put it over the furnace or the stove and just slightly discolor it. You can also use this technique to soften the material if it's getting too hard, or if you started out with some harder material. What you want to do, I will show you with a simple lighter now, but you don't want to overheat the material, so you don't want to get a cherry red glowing piece of copper. We just want it to discolorate a little bit. You let it cool down. This is the lower end of the back side, so that doesn't matter. And this can be done as even as or as uneven as you like. And then you just like rub it out, or you can take a finer sandpaper. This is, I think, 400, yeah. And go over the higher points, and then you accentuate the rivets even more, while the backdrop of this looks worn and sooty and, you know, dirty. And this is what you would expect, you know, the rivets are sticking out more, so the chance that they are hit by something else is more likely. And that's actually all there is to it. You can do this with square panels. You can make, I've been doing some, I think it's not, no, it's not on this one, it was on another pen. But you can also do like round panels, so you get more of a hatch. And you can see, you can't see, but here and here I put too much pressure on the Torx bit, so I went through the material. Now the aluminium you can't heat up. You cannot heat up. It will wrinkle and curl, and you know. This is okay. This is some thicker. But if you want to do use the aluminium foil like you use in the kitchen, it's like 15 microns thick. It's too thin to use for just about anything. You might do a wrap with it, but you can't put any accent in, or I haven't found a way to do it anyway. By heating it for different length of time, and then that way you can get some different colors. You might get more bluish haze if you hold it in a flame longer. You can do an uneven take on this, and make sure when you start heating that you have an oversized piece, because the spot where you hold it will have a different color because of the heat discharge towards the pliers or the tweezers, whatever you're using. So you can see, I hope, you have different strengths of discoloration or wear or whatever, aging. And you can use a micro polishing paste or whatever to undo it a little bit, or work it a little bit to get it to the point that you're liking it. That's about it. Thank you for watching. If there's any questions, just post it in the comments or send me an email or whatever. Thank you for watching once more.